Okay, let's start off by looking at the bid rent model and in particular think about what kind of things it suggests about the city, the shape of the city, the layout of people, the use of land, that sort of thing. So just real quickly, let's look at this little area here, the simplest bid rent model, and this is just a situation where we have people that are living a variety of distances from the town center. And these amounts here are what those people would be willing to pay in rent in order to live in a particular place. So there's a variety of simplifying assumptions here, one of them being that all the properties are homogeneous. There's no really distinctions between properties except for the distance from the city center, from the CBD, the central business district. A few other assumptions here, that there's a uniform traveling time and there's a uniform wage. And so really what this is getting at is the notion of an opportunity cost from being away from where you're going to be working. So the longer you have to drive, the more time you're going to spend in a car, the more that's going to be costing you in terms of what you could have been earning while you're working. And so the end result is that you'd be willing to pay more to live in the city center. And that's going to push rents up, push land values up as you get closer and closer to the city center. This second grid over here takes into account the notion that we have some people that don't want to drive, they're willing to, or they desire to walk, and because walking takes a lot longer period of time, that's going to have a higher opportunity cost for them. They're willing to pay more to live nearer the city center so they can still walk to work and do all the things that they want to do. So they're willing to pay even more because the value of their time and the time it takes to walk is excessive. So they're going to kind of sort themselves into bidding up that first mile away from the central business district. All of the drivers, all of the people willing and wanting to drive are going to be kind of pushed out by virtue of how much they're willing to pay for their time to get to the city center. This third area down here is adding in a new little layer here. Now we're going to have doctors who are working downtown in an area of medical offices. The medical offices are downtown, and of course doctors are making a whole lot more than the regular people, the unwashed masses, and so their time is more valuable. And they will, because of the high value of their time and their services, they're going to tend to locate themselves closer to the city center. They're going to be willing to pay more as well. And so what that does is it pushes out, again, everybody else further away from the city center than they would have been otherwise. So back over here, we've got some drivers that are within the first mile. Over here we have no drivers really within the first mile. As long as there's sufficient walkers, a sufficient number of walkers, they will bid up the cost of living and renting in that first mile to a much higher level than drivers are willing to pay. Similarly, in this little area down here, the medical workers are going to be willing to bid higher amounts for the land use in that close-in area. In this particular case, there weren't enough medical professionals to use up all of the space within that first mile, so there is still some area left for walkers, and again they're going to get pushed out further away from the city center because they value the land less than the medical office workers. And then finally, this bottom right, we got a picture where there's a variety of different modes or nodes, I guess I should say, in the city. There's the CBD, and there's also a medical center that's a little bit further away from the CBD. And we have kind of these two areas where people will sort themselves out. So there's still going to be the CBD oriented workers, and the walking people are still going to find themselves closest into the city because they value their time and it takes longer to walk. Then there's going to be another area around the doctor's offices where people will bid up rents if they are medical service providers. They're going to want to be close to the medical offices. They'll be willing to pay higher rents to be around there. They don't necessarily care now about the CBD and how long it takes them to get to the CBD. They want to be near the doctor's offices. And so the medical users, the medical service providers, are going to bid up the rents near the doctor's offices. And then you have the regular workers, the driving people. They're going to get pushed out to the edge, to the boundary, because they don't have as much value. They have transportation to get them to, they're going to drive in their car to get to the CBD. Now, I did notice here there's the residences of medical workers. They will tend to sort themselves closer to the medical offices because they have a higher wage than the CBD-oriented drivers. And again, the shapes of these curves would change based on the speed of the commute, what your hourly wage is, all these sorts of things. But there's a few big takeaways that I want to kind of highlight here. And that is one, that this model gives us a sense of how the density of land use is going to occur. So in all three of these cases here, the CBD is going to have the most valuable land, and that's going to imply that we have the highest density of use near the CBD. So density being, we're going to want to squeeze in as many square feet as we can of office space, of retail space, of those kind of spaces within a small area, because the land value is so high. And so what you'll tend to see is high-rises. You'll see skyscraper office buildings, or you'll see high-rise apartments, high-rise condo units, that sort of thing. So land is much more precious near the CBD. The rents are much more high. And again, this is really for the land. The land value is much higher closer to the CBD. So you'll see a much more intense use of land. Another thing that we notice here is that competing uses will kind of sort themselves out with respect to the city, and this shows up better in this bottom right picture, where you have the CBD office workers and then you have the medical center workers, and they've kind of sorted themselves out into these two nodes, and people will tend to gravitate towards those uses that are most valuable to them. In this case, we have the CBD office workers that are walkers are going to live closest to the CBD. They're going to be willing to pay the most there. And then the medical related services are going to be near the doctor's offices. The doctors are going to live there. The residences of medical workers are going to be closer to the medical center. And then everyone else is kind of pushed out to the city edge. Another picture that this gives us is how land value is determined. There's going to be, now this is a very simple model. Again, this is only considering transportation costs, commuting time, that sort of thing. And obviously there's a whole variety of different factors that we could take into account. This also assumed, by the way, all of these models, that places were homogeneous, so we're not talking about prettier land or more attractive amenities, that sort of thing. The value is going to be based on where the highest use and the best use of the land is, and who's willing to, or who gets the most out of a location, who gets the most out of a piece of land. They're going to be willing to bid the highest amount for it. And then finally, this gives us a sense of how land use might change over time. So as new uses kind of percolate and navigate towards a specific area, that might become a new hub, a new center for a particular kind of economic activity. Maybe it's education, maybe it's medical services, maybe it's shopping. There's a shopping district, and so we're going to have things that kind of gravitate towards there. And so this would show how land might change over time. The value and the value of that land to particular people may change, and people will resort themselves out based on the land use that they need, what economic value they're getting out of the land. So I don't want to get into too much of the particulars of the bid rent model, but mainly these big ideas of how density is impacted by people's value of the land, the value of their time, and that sort of thing. So again, those four things that I mentioned in the notes, make sure you have a decent sense of those. Read through the part in the book and get an overall sense of what the model is doing, but I don't want to have you memorize any of the particulars of this. All right, let's move on to some urban forms here. And we got three different pictures, or three different types of urban forms that we're going to consider. So the first one is the concentric ring model. This is an older model, 1920s vintage model, and it's basically a picture of ever-growing, ever-expanding circles. Let me see if I can find a picture of that. Well, you know what? Before I get a picture of that, I'm going to stop here and we'll pick up with the urban forms in the video next, number 3. So let me stop here to keep this around 10 minutes, and we'll pick that up in the next video.